Good morning, members. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. I call to order today's meeting. First of all, thank for supporting myself to become the chairman of the Bills Committee. Item 1, meeting with the administration. I will now ask the Secretariat to invite the government officials to come in. In attendance of today's meeting are Ms. Ivy Law, Deputy Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Ms. Wendy Au, Principal Assistant Secretary, Ms. Azan Yu, Deputy Director, Mr. Yip Kwok Chung, Senior Superintendent, and Ms. Vonda Lam, Government Counsel. Now, on the background of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024, please refer to the papers on the agenda. There are 3 sets of paper. First, Council brief prepared by the EEB. Second, report of the Legal Service Division. Third, background brief prepared by the Secretariat. Now, between November 2023 and January 2024, the second stage proposed amendments to the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance has been consulted by the public. Some 3,000 submissions were received, and most submissions are in favor of the amendment. Members, do we need to invite public submissions for the bill? I personally think that there are already 1,700 submissions submitted during the public health consultation process. I believe any further submissions would be similar to those we have received. So I don't recommend inviting public submission. Mr. Stephen Ho? I still think you should invite public submissions from the public. Maybe there are some interesting views. We shouldn't rule out any further views. Maybe we don't need to have a public hearing. Ms. Rebecca Chen? Do you mean public hearing or inviting public submissions by consulting the public? From my understanding, what the government did was a public consultation. Now, for stakeholders in the profession, we need their professional input. Deputy Secretary, can you tell us more about the public consultation? Good morning, Chairman and members. In response to the question, we did consult the public. On a daily basis, the FEHD has a close liaison with the trade. The trade is well informed of the amendments this time around. Mr. Chen Hock-Fung, we need to conduct a public consultation by way of inviting public submission or even public hearing. I'm fine with both approaches, but the LegCo has to conduct its own consultation process. 3 members have pressed the button, Mr. Lam Shen-Sing, Tony Jie, and Dennis Leung. Do we all agree that we should invite public submission? In that case, let's say we invite public submission from the public. Ms. Dennis Leung? So we invite each member to speak. Mr. Lam Shen-Sing. I support inviting public submission. Besides community associations, there are also civil servants bodies which are concerned about law enforcement issues. I think public submission is needed. Mr. Tony Jie. Thank you, Chairman. I'm open to any format of public consultation, deputation, or public submission. Now, the government has conducted a round of public consultation. The Deputy Secretary said there is communication with the professional bodies, but there should be more focused consultation on specific sectors like the property management sector. We need to be more targeted. We need to invite these professional bodies to give us their views because they will be affected by the bill. Mr. Dennis Leung. The previous round of consultation was a general survey on the opinion of the public on the bill. However, the details and the specifics of the bill were not announced back then. So I think we should keep the channel open to take their views on the provisions of the bill. There may be views from the law enforcement agencies. Some frontline law enforcers may identify some issues in their work, so it will go a long way to consult their views. Thank you very much. I've heard the views. So the Bills Committee will invite public submissions from the relevant stakeholders. Mr. Stephen Ho, from what the other members said, we should be focused on inviting professional bodies or even owners' corporations to submit their views to us. So it won't do just putting a notice on our website. We need to reach out to these professional bodies to invite their views. Thank you. If there are any professional bodies in mind, please suggest them to the Secretariat, and then the Secretariat will inform the relevant professional bodies on your behalf. That is decided then. Now we will discuss the policy matters of the bill. Please be reminded that the legal advisor has sent a letter to the administration dated the 12th of December. A reply letter has been submitted as well by the administration as well. Now, I invite Ms. Ivy Law, the Deputy Secretary, to walk us through the bill. Those who would like to speak, please press the button now. Deputy Secretary, please. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. The government is dedicated to improving environmental hygiene. The amendment proposals are the fruits of the second stage amendment process. Now, the bill will strengthen the statutory powers and deterrent effects for dealing with public health nuisances. To more effectively address common public health nuisances, for example, water seepage in buildings and water dripping from air conditioners, the most important step is to gain entry into the relevant premises for investigation purpose. So the bill proposed to extend the permissible hours of entering premises for investigation from the period between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to the period between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. to accommodate contemporary lifestyle and work schedules of our citizens. In the cases where a notice of intended entry is issued, failure to comply with the notice without reasonable excuse will warrant an offense. This will further incentivize premise owner to cooperate with the investigation so that the public health nuisances can be dealt with as soon as possible. Now, for private premises, especially common parts of the building, there may be vermin infestation. Normally speaking, private premises owners and occupiers have the duty to maintain environmental hygiene on their premises. However, for the common areas, there may be negligence. So now, we propose to amend the law to empower the FEHD to serve a notice on the owner, occupier, or persons responsible for the management, for example, property management companies and owners corporations, to request the removal of accumulated water causing mosquito breeding, and also to deal with the vermin infestation issue. Now, the case is serious, so serious that it warrants immediate intervention by the FEHD. Even before issuance of the notice, the FEHD can recover the costs incurred afterwards. This will prevent the relevant persons from regarding the service as a free government service. This will prompt owners, occupiers, or property management companies to more actively deal with the vermin issue. We also recommend shortening the removal time specified on the notice to remove obstruction to a period of no less than 30 minutes from 4 hours. This will help keep the cityscape clean. At present, the FEHD would provide a discretionary period of no less than 30 minutes for the article owners to remove their objects. We also propose empowering the FEHD to remove display equipment of illegal display or affixation of bills of protest. And also, we have introduced new provisions under the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance to empower the FEHD to remove the obstructing articles, or, in case of non-compliance, remove the articles themselves. Now, this will empower the FEHD to exercise the power without relying on the power of the Hong Kong Police Force under the Summary Offences Ordinance. This will not change the approach of how the authority handle shopfront extension. It is mere empowering the FEHD to exercise the power themselves. The penalty will remain the same. Also, we propose to update penalty levels, not adjusted since 1996, for example, on vermin proliferation and also obstructing scavenging operation to enhance deterrence. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. 5 members have pressed the button to speak. They are Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Chen Hock-Fung, Lam Chun-Sing, Chong Li-Jie, and Dennis Leung. Each member will have 4 minutes, questions and answers included. Please keep the time strictly to allow sufficient time for the administration to reply. Mr. Stephen Ho, Chairman. Now, there is no time limit for the meeting of Bills Committee, so please be more flexible. So this bill covers water seepage, water dripping, and shopfront extension. So I will break down my questions into several parts. Now, I would like to ask about shopfront extension first. Now, the FEHD will be empowered to deal with these obstructions themselves. However, after enhancing the penalty for shopfront extension, when I talk to shop operators, it seems that the same penalty of $6,000 is imposed on shop operators in public wet markets as well. But as far as I understand, a separate set of regulations should apply to shopfront extension in wet markets. Should we use the same penalty? Now, the business in wet market is very poor. I heard that it is the FEHD's intention to increase footfall in wet markets to improve the business. Deputy Secretary, thank you, Mr. Ho. Concerning public wet markets managed by the FEHD, we do manage them under a separate set of regulation. Now, because of the specific circumstances in wet markets, we would issue verbal warning to the offender, and for non-compliance, there will be a penalty. I would defer to my colleague for further details. the penalty level is different from normal shopfront extension.
That's exactly what I want to understand. So the obstruction in the wet markets is not obstruction of public places? Well, there is a specific ordinance governing the wet markets operation. So if there is a specific ordinance, we'll refer to that particular ordinance. That is a usual practice. All right, so this is still obstruction. Well, going with Shukaifai to the districts, we have seen such instances within the markets. So for obstructions, the goods that cause the obstruction, while they were asked to be removed, sometimes the shop owners would move the goods to the roadside even. Now, if that is the case, well, definitely we do not want to play a cat and mouse game with the shop owners. So I think we'll have to strengthen our capabilities and force in enforcing this particular provision. Thank you, Mr. Ho, for the suggestion. Actually, for CAP 228 Summary Offences Ordinance, the implementation and the powers are more or less the same. Now, if the goods identified are related to the operation of the shops and the shops have extended its shop front and caused obstruction, and if there is clear evidence, then yes, there will be enforcement. So you're saying there will be like half an hour's time for the shop owner to move the goods. What if the goods are moved by the shop owner to the road or to the roadside? What then? I mean, if you want to enforce the ordinance, you have to resolve the problems at its roots. Chan Hock-Fung, right. This is exactly, FEHD, this is exactly what is being done. Where the goods are moved to the roadside, the police and the relevant officers will ask the shops to remove those goods from the affected areas. So what the answer is that after this ordinance is put up, according to the new wording, the goods that are put onto the roadside, as you have mentioned just now, can also be removed under this particular ordinance. Well, Chan Hock-Fung. Well, Chair, we are in support of this ordinance, the amendment in principle. Yes, there are a lot of citizens in Hong Kong who have experienced and have complained against water leakage, vermin, etc., and also obstructions of public places. But there are areas where we can definitely speak in more detail. Now, for premises where there is a lot of vermin inside or cockroaches and etc., this is not an ordinary household. Perhaps the owner is one suffering from mental situations. So, because this is a problem in itself, the laws would not take those situations into consideration. So even changing or amending the law would not solve those household problems. And this is about private property. There may be a conflict with the rights of a person with its ownership of private property, being the premise. And if you want to enter for investigation, there may be a conflict. And also for the owners' corporation, is it really that easy to chase after the owners or the owners' corporations? I mean, most of the people would want their own homes to be clean. So for this particular ordinance, how is it going to be effective if the property owner is not of sound mind? Now, another question for some of the this is nearing the end of the year. A lot of the shops will have to load and unload their goods, and if there is very stringent enforcement, especially during this period of time, it may be a problem for them. And what about certain loopholes? Let's say if the goods of the shops were put on a push trolley. Now, according to my understanding, that is not treated as obstruction of streets. It is a movable object if it is loaded onto a push trolley. What then? How would you treat those? Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for the opinions. On garbage, question, I would agree with Mr. Chan. And you probably, as legislative members, would have received a lot of such complaints. And in those houses are perhaps old people or people who need help. People who are mentally challenged, for instance. So in handling these cases, the government's stance would usually be more cooperative among or cross departments. We would notify the Home Office, the District Office, or the Social Welfare Department to provide assistance and help, and we would use persuasion as a method. Now, if it has come to a point where the household has caused a major disturbance to the neighbors in terms of health and hygiene, then there will have to be enforcement, and as much as possible, we will clear the garbage from the premise after entrance. And we will also be discussing with the homeowner concerned. Now, for the next question, under what circumstance where the vermin situation is a serious one, and even before there is the notification, the law enforcement will have to enter the premise? Well, usually we would send a notification to the owners for clearing of the garbage, because this is really the responsibility of the owner concerned. But where there is a threat or a disturbance caused to neighbors in terms of health and hygiene, we would enter the premise, and yes, we would recuperate the cost concerned. And just now, Mr. Chan asked about the basis for recuperation of cost. Well, under the civil litigation and debt mechanism, we will have a basis for cost recuperation. So that would be the basis for the calculation and the recuperation of the cost. As for obstruction of streets or public places, I will have FEHD supplement, but as a response, if we can identify that the goods or the objects concerned are related to the operation of the shops, we will be able to enforce the law under such circumstance. FEHD? Yes. Our frontline officers will look at the actual situation, and our guidance for our frontline officers is that if it is a normal loading and unloading situation, we will not stop that. But if there is a long-term placing of goods or objects on the streets, even on trolleys, let's say for over 2 hours or 1 or 2 hours, then yes, we would enforce the law. Now, even if it is placed on push trolleys, that is not a main concern or consideration. The main consideration is whether it is indeed an upload and unload of goods, and whether the objects concerned had been in the streets for, let's say, 1 or 2 hours. Those are the considerations for enforcement. Lam Chun Sing, it says there can be an authorization of the FEHD in the stamping out of vermin such as rats, etc., and there will be recuperation of costs. And this is much like the fire department's situation earlier, where the owners will have to pay up after the fire services department have done their work, and there will. My question is, when would you step in right away to take such actions? The secretary in the past had been very high profile in combating these black spots in terms of health and hygiene. So will you be doing that? Will you be sweeping through the buildings and giving out notifications? And so the buildings, some would have their own incorporated owners, owners corporation, or some would have management companies and some will have none. And the owners of the buildings will have to chip in for such works. And for some of the buildings, perhaps the owners would think, well, my building situation is not all that bad. Why do you want me to fork out money? Why does there have to be such works carried out? And so what kind of a situation are we talking about in terms of cost? For example, if there should be households with difficulties, can there be installment payments, etc.? And a third question, in terms of the amendment of the law, last year a lot of LegCo members have suggested that there can be perhaps a progressive program for penalties and fines. So perhaps that will be in the second stage for consideration. But in this present paper, I don't see that you have considered this progressive fines. And in 2021, it was pointed out that there were 13,000 cases which were repeated offenses. And on average, repeated offenses would exceed 7 times. And so progressive fines is actually recommended. Now, in your paper, you talk about easy mount frames, and so this is not really resolving the problem. So perhaps the Ombudsman's suggestion of the progressive fines can be considered so that it really solves the problem. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for the questions. Mr. Lam asked under what circumstances where before notifications are sent, the department would go in to clean the buildings. Now, where the FEHD had already issued the notification to the private buildings, but there is non-compliance, then the FEHD can go in to clean the buildings on their behalf, and there can be a cost recuperation for their amendment bill this time. On this particular basis, we are putting in the content where under emergency situations where there is a threat to public health and hygiene or dangerous situations, then even before sending out the notification to these, let's say, vermin-infested households and buildings, etc., the department can step in even before then. As for the mechanism for recuperation of cost, it is through civil claims or debts mechanism. And of course, there will have to be court procedures therein. And please be relieved that there will be a court procedure to handle such recuperation of costs. Second question concerning the shopfront extension and obstruction of public places, the reason why we have not put in progressive fines. Yes, we have considered progressive fining, but since our first stage of review of the work of this ordinance, and that is the fixed penalty and the highest penalty to be meted out by the courts, we have done a lot of public education and publicity, and I would want to thank the LegCo members in doing the work in your districts, talking to the shops, and they have been a lot more compliant. And the fixed penalty is $6,000 now, and they are willing to comply and to meet the community's needs. Now, in the past, some of the goods were put, horizontally into the streets, but now their display racks are more vertical, causing less obstruction to public places. Now, since the fixed penalty levels, the notices for fixed panels had been reduced by 90%. So given that, we think that there is no need to introduce progressive panels or fines at this point. And we have reported this to the panel concerned at the LegCo, and they are in agreement with our practice. So, of course, where there is need, we can always review again to see whether we should include progressive fines.
Mr. Tony Che, thank you, Chairman. Improving and enhancing environmental hygiene is something that we all support. The amendment bill will tackle public nuisances like water seepage in buildings, water dripping from air conditioners, and mosquito and vermin proliferation. They look like minor nuisances. Still, it would cause a negative impact on the mental health of the residents. So as the Deputy Secretary said, the first stage was very successful. So we are curious about the outcomes, the possible effects of the second stage. Now for air conditioners, water dripping, sometimes we have to walk on the carriageway to stay clear of the water drops. The administration has said that it is a very thorny issue. So I wonder how helpful will the second stage law amendments be in tackling the issue. That is very important. Since you are amending the law, let's just be more thorough. Second, you previously mentioned that you would apply technology to tackle shorefront extension. So what is the progress now? The note to paragraph 14 in the paper mentioned something about tackling shorefront extension with technology. Deputy Secretary, 2 questions about the effectiveness of the bill and the technology used. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree that public health nuisances are very stressful for residents. That's why the government has been dedicated to addressing these nuisances. This amendment bill is one of the tools to enhance the authority and power of the law enforcement agencies. Besides legislative amendment, we also adopt other approaches. For example, in tackling water seepage and water dripping from air conditioners, very often we would formulate a plan with the owners' corporations to assist them more effectively address these neighborhood issues. In terms of water seepage, we will gradually introduce microwave screening and infrared technology to detect the source of the water seepage. Concerning water dripping from air conditioners, to address the source, we must tackle the problem is with the building structure. After year 2000, for newly built buildings, the building ordinance required a new system for catching the condensation from air conditioners. For all the buildings, the FEHD is now using 5G cameras to detect the source of the water drip. A large-scale operation called Clear Sky was conducted earlier on to deal with water dripping from air conditioners. So, in addressing public health nuisances, we have been adopting a multi-pronged approach. Public education and publicity are also important. Chairman, just very briefly, I think the Deputy Secretary hasn't answered my key question, that is the effectiveness. I know you are doing a lot in terms of addressing water seepage, so tell us the outcome so that we have more confidence in you. Maybe you can follow it up in the second round, since you have indicated your wish to do so already. Next, Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Several questions about water dripping from air conditioners. Mr. Tong Li-jie mentioned a query about the effectiveness of the effort. Now, smart technologies or smart cameras are deployed to detect water dripping. But from the cases I dealt with, for old buildings, if you cast your eyes upwards, you can see an entire row of air conditioners hanging from the building. So I wonder how effective these new technologies are in detecting the source of the water drip. Second, in dealing with garbage apartments, many members mentioned that the issue of garbage apartments are not so simple. It involves disorders like a hoarding or other family issues. So discretion is called for. But there is only so far that discretion can go, because garbage apartments would jeopardize public health. So after the amendment, how much discretion will you give to owners of garbage apartments? Where will you draw the line between discretion and protection of public health? Also, vermin infestation. Now, the paper says for serious cases, even without vermin notice, effective and reasonable steps can be taken by the FEHD to remove the vermin. Now, for extremely serious cases, do you have the authority to gain entry into a premises? For example, for the building departments, when there is a leaking pipe flooding the premises, the buildings departments can gain entry into the premises within hours, maybe in the same afternoon. I have personally dealt with a case like that. So for vermin infestation, if the situation is so serious that we see cockroaches and rats crawling out from the apartment, do you have the power to gain entry into the premises? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Scott Leung. Concerning water dripping from air conditioners, there are dedicated teams under the FEHD to patrol areas where the situation is prevalent. And like I said, we use that infrared cameras and 5G cameras to detect water dripping. Upon receipt of complaints, within 6 days, we will have conducted investigation and given a reply to the complainants in 10 days. Now, for garbage apartments, I agree that we need to be considerate. We need to exercise discretion and pragmatism. Now, let me give you some figures. In 2023, we have issued 2 notice of intended entry and 5 in 2024. Now, for joint operations for removing and clearing garbages in garbage apartments, there were 6 in 2022 and 5 in 2023. If the situation is so serious that it causes extreme nuisances to the neighborhood, then the FEHD will take further action. Other forms of support would be given to the households, for example, from the SWD. Now, concerning vermin infestation, when will the FEHD intervene even without issuance of notice? Rest assured that the FEHD will formulate guidelines for the frontline staff. Next, Ms. Rebecca Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Now, the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024 covers a wide range of public health nuisances, water seepage, garbage apartments, vermin, and even occupying public space, causing disruption to scavenging operations, and also training and public education. So there are a lot of issues. In this round, I will ask questions about garbage apartments first. At the panel meeting, we have agreed that this is a very thorny issue. So first, I applaud the courage of the administration and the FEHD to review what powers can be obtained from the existing ordinance to deal with the thorny issue. But I'm concerned that although there is a law enforcement mechanism for garbage apartments, it doesn't help much. You have broadened the definition of litter in Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance, but the change is just adding the word article after substance. So substance or article likely to constitute a nuisance. How will the change in definition help you deal with the issue? Now, for public housing estates, it is much easier to deal with the issue. There is the marking scheme, and the housing authority can take back the house. The difficult part lies in private housing estates or subsidized sales flats. Now, the case I have dealt with in Shatin, I brought the departments together for me, including district offices, FEHD, and so on. But there is no ordinance allowing them to gain entry into the house. Now you need to remove the litter mentioned in the law, but without the power to gain entry, the litter cannot be removed. So there are several ways to do that. First, maybe when there is suspicion of immediate danger, for example, a fire in the house, then the fire departments, the fire service departments, and the police force can gain entry. Second, you need to see rodents with your eye to gain entry. Even though there may be garbages piling up to the ceiling in the house, you have to rely on sighting of rodents to gain entry. So in dealing with garbage apartments, I think all the current amendments are for empowering you to remove the litter after you have gained entry, but not for gaining entry. 2 questions, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Rebecca Chan, for your views. You are very familiar with the garbage apartments issue. You have hit the nail on the head. There are inadequacies under various ordinances. For the FEHD, we have to rely on the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. The cases you mentioned are in a private premises. We have no power to gain entry into private premises unless there is an emergency. That is the spirit of our rule of law system. When there are complaints, the FHD will take actions together with other departments. By taking action, I mean collaborating with other departments. As you mentioned, the owner, occupier of garbage apartments are usually elderly people or people with mental issues. So a hard approach would not be helpful. Now, together with Social Welfare Department, FSD, and the police force and the FHD, we will conduct a joint operation. For extremely serious cases, we will apply for an order. Now, there are two enhancements in the bill. First, the notice of intended entry. We have strengthened the power under the notice of intended entry. Second is to broaden the definition of litter. This is a technical change. After gaining entry, the FEHD staff will clear away the articles causing public health concerns. However, at present, the definition of litter only includes substance. So it gives the perception that we're talking about chemical substance with no form. So for soaked newspaper with rodents crawling on them, are they substance? It may give rise to confusion. So to clarify this, we propose these technical amendments to add article to the definition of litter.
A follow-up question for you. Just now you mentioned that the ordinances can be evoked where there is a situation causing nuisance to the environment, hygiene and health. And in Meifu Shanqun, there was an incident where there was enforced entry. And so my question is, apart from handling litter, does it mean that the neighbors of the relevant apartment will have to take pictures, etc., of vermin, of rats and cockroaches, etc.? I mean, under what circumstance would you be able to, or under the present ordinances, while we still have an opportunity to amend the ordinance to give you more powers to effect entry of premise? Well, thank you, Chair. Just now, I think Ms. Chan's question was one of providing evidence. If we see investigation of vermin, if our officers have witnessed that, we will definitely be able to apply to the court for such a warrant. And this is a first-person evidence, and that would be straightforward. But where the officer did not personally witness that, then it would be a little bit more complicated. First of all, evidence will have to be raised to the court to satisfaction, and there will have to be questions whether the neighbors or persons concerned had provided full and accurate information. So we would want our officers to have first-person witness of the situation. But failing that, where there are substantial evidence such as videos, etc., that would definitely help too. Lacking these, it would be more complicated. So as Ms. Chan had mentioned, yes, we want to have substantive evidence to provide to the court. And the court will have to make a judgment in issuing the warrant. Next, Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. For the ordinance in question, I'm concerned most about the following points. First of all, on shopfront extension. I believe public hygiene and health is very important, but at the same time, it has to be balanced with economic development. Let me give you an example. This is early in the morning today in Futian. Futian is a very clean city, but there are actually a lot of hawkers on the streets selling breakfasts to the residents. And I'm thinking, why can't Futian in Shenzhen do this? But on the other hand, for us, we are raising the fixed penalty to $6,000, or now the maximum penalty is even more. Why do we have to do this? Actually, you can see that the hawkers are not causing a lot of nuisance and not very dirty. And there is a fast food shop, a chain fast food shop, which is also kind of doing the same. This is actually providing convenience to the residents, and they are also making a livelihood, these hawkers. Now, I understand for shopfront extension, if the extension is, very much extended from the shop itself, that is a problem. But if you go to the flower market in the Prince Edward area, the shop owners have told me that there are rounds and rounds of inspections every day. And plants grow. For example, at Bamboo Grove, at the shop, the bamboos would grow, and the flowers and the plants would grow outside of the area of the shop. I mean, can they really make a livelihood if it is so stringent? I mean, this is just an example, the flower market instance. Now, also, for shopfront extension, for moving the goods away where there is an obstruction, it is very loose. It just say where there is reason to believe that there is obstruction of the street or public places. I mean, could that be too stringent? Do we not have to balance that with livelihood and economy? And another question concerning the incorporated owners corp. I understand that there can be notifications issued to the owners' corporations, and if they do not comply, there will have to be penalties. Now, for very clean buildings, that's fine, but there are different types of buildings in Yau Ma Tei, the old areas, for example. Is this at all practicable? If you put such onus on the owners corporation, who would want to be office bearers at such owners corporations? Thank you very much for Ms. Doreen Kong's questions concerning obstruction of the streets situation. I just want to emphasize that the amendment for this round is based on the shopfront extension, obstruction of public places under Cap 228. We have put that kind of similar wording into our ordinance in question so that the FEHD will be empowered to remove such obstructing articles without resort to the police. And that would not change the standard of enforcement for the shops, and it would not change the penalties. So that's by way of supplement in terms of answer. Next, concerning when and how it would constitute an obstruction of public places by the shop, there are actually very clear stipulations within the ordinance. For example, the articles concerned are placed in public places causing inconvenience or danger to the public, then that would constitute shopfront extension obstructing public places. And also, we will issue guidelines while we enforce a law. We, at the same time, would not cause any detriment to economic activities. So there will be suitable balance, as Ms. Kong had mentioned just now. Now, as for public places cleanliness, we're talking about private buildings, and the private buildings owners has the responsibility for the building's cleanliness and hygiene. they owe that responsibility to their neighbors and to the community at large because this is their place, they own it. So the reason why we have this amendment this round is so that when we issue the notices to the owners corporation, and where there are no owners corp, the management officers or companies, they can institute action as soon as possible. That is a purpose. And of course, we'll provide help as well. If in cleaning the building, technically they have problems, then the FEHD would be open to provide technical advice. Perhaps the recommendations and suggestions so that the buildings will be more effective in dealing with their cleanliness issues. Yes, we're going into the second round of questioning. There are 7 members who have pushed the button. Let me just read the names out. Chan Hock-Fong, Stephen Ho, Lam Chun Sing, Tony Jie, Chan Hoi-Yan, and Doreen Kong. So 4 minutes again, including question and answer. Yes, I very much agree with Ms. Chan in her point about the entry of premise. Yeah, there was an apartment with a lot of vermin, rats, and cockroaches, but there was no way that the authorities were able to enter the premise. In the end, it was a chairman of the owners corporation who had to talk to the owner of the apartment for quite a few days before there can be any action taken. And even so, the action was that the owner of the apartment was sitting at the door of the entrance and saying this is to be thrown away, that cannot be thrown away, etc., etc. So what are the standards? Where do you set the standards? Does it mean that where there is a little bit of water seepage and you can therefore gain access into the apartment? We can talk about some of the details a little bit here. And I'm looking at paragraph 12 of the paper. Yes, paragraph 12 of the paper here. It says that for shopfront extension, where these are perishables, you will be handling those first. And then there will be a system for compensation. Now, my question is, how would that be triggered? Now, for example, there is fruit, for example, perishables that were disposed, and those fruits are near to rotting. And after removing of such fruit, the relevant persons come to you for compensation. What then? Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. First of all, for the garbage apartments, the ordinance already gives us the power where the apartment is causing nuisance under the ordinance. There is already power under the ordinance as it stands here. Now, as for the standards, Mr. Chen asked, for FEHD, last year they have already come up with a guideline concerning these garbage apartments. So there are guidelines already issued. And as mentioned, if we are to apply to the court for warrants, we will have to provide evidence and we will have to mention under what circumstance we can gain access into the apartment. The FEHD will supplement later on. As for the compensation mechanism, the next question, in order to handle more effectively the shopfront extension and obstruction articles, there is a system for compensation for hawkers, for example. For FEHD, in the past, there had been such cases where we have in our enforcement operation, we have already confiscated the articles from the hawkers. There are compensations, and there are very clear stipulations in the ordinance to say that if the compensation's not reasonable, then there can be recourse to the court.
要嘅嘢。
The point is, there may be things that the owner is not entitled to claim back. So does the owner only have the right to claim a compensation after winning the case or being found not guilty? The claim has nothing to do with the conviction itself. A claim can be made to get back the article. If it is still here, we would consider returning the article to the owner. When the article has already been destroyed, then we will calculate the difference between the value of the article and the removal cost. Now, if an admission to public obstruction is obtained, then we would consider prosecuting the wrongdoer. So taking all these into account, we don't expect the scenario you mentioned to be likely. What about garbage apartments? Thank you. As mentioned by the Deputy Secretary, now the power to gain entry into a garbage apartment is specified in the law. First, whether there is a public nuisance caused. If there is prima facie evidence that it is a public health nuisance, then we can gain entry. If there is also a vermin investigation, then we also have the power to gain entry. The power is there in the law. However, when the owner or the occupier is not cooperative, we may have to apply for a court warrant. Now, the conditions I mentioned include many things. For example, dirty water flowing out from the premises, sighting of rodents, and garbages outside the premises, and so on. So we will conduct an experience sharing session with the frontline staff to explain to them what conditions would warrant their actions. Now, for cases we have successfully obtained a warrant from the court, we will also share these successful cases with the frontline staff. So we can't say for sure what conditions would warrant entry into premises, but we will share cases with our frontline staff. Mr. Stephen Ho. I think the paper is quite comprehensive, but there is one point that I don't understand. When would you conduct the value assessment exercise on the forfeited goods? Now, for perishable goods like vegetables and fruits, you would destroy the perishable items immediately. Then the owners would claim that the fruits or vegetables are extremely valuable. They cost as much as $1,000 per box. So when would you conduct a value assessment exercise? If we are talking about high value agricultural products, they may become a case authority. If I am a calculating person, then I may calculate the possible compensation from the government as a businessman. Deputy Secretary or Deputy Director for Food and Environmental Hygiene, thank you. For highly perishable items like cut fruits or vegetables, these would be dealt with promptly. they would be disposed of or destroyed. But before that, the FEHD would take a record of their types and the conditions. In case of a claim filed in the future, we would consider the price, the market price of similar items in conducting the value assessment exercise. If the other parties agree, they may apply for a reassessment with the court. Now, first of all, by making a claim, they will have to first pay the removal cost, and also there is the health risk. Now, for removal conducted under the Summary Offences Ordinance, we didn't see a lot of cases where the owners claim the item back, especially after enhancing the penalty for shopfront extension. We think the risk of abuse by making a claim for highly perishable items is low. Another thing, now a shop operator breaking the law needs to take their own risk. So why are they allowed to file a claim whether they are convicted or not? Now, if they are not convicted, it is only right for the government to compensate for the loss. However, if they are convicted and they fail to comply with the removal order, why are they still allowed to file a claim? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Stephen Ho. Now, for shopfront extension offender, they would have been punished under the relevant ordinance. For private property, even if the items caused public obstruction, the removal cost has been paid for and the offender has been punished by the court via fixed penalty notice. So, in the spirit of upholding private property rights, we would allow the owner to file a claim for items, even if they are highly perishable. I'm not very happy with the answer, but time's up. I will wait for the next round. Next, Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Chairman. My question is about manpower for law enforcement. In the future, the permissible entry hours will be extended to evening time in the absence of the police force. And also the removal time is shortened from 4 hours to not less than 30 minutes. So in the past, the FHD would require assistance from other departments for removal of articles. In the future, the FHD will rely on outsourced cleaning workers and so on to remove the articles. Now, even if the removal time is shortened to not less than 30 minutes, if manpower is insufficient, then the removal process will still be delayed. So manpower is key. Also, in the past, the FEHD can only remove the articles with the assistance of the police under specific circumstances. Now, FEHD staff can handle this themselves. So are you worried that in the initial stage of law enforcement, there may be conflicts between your frontline staff and the shop owners, and then the police would think this is no longer their responsibilities? Will this create a problem? How will you work with the police force? Last year, there were 800 body-worn cameras distributed to your frontline staff. So what is the feedback? Is it effective? And with the amendments to the law, will more body-worn cameras be distributed to the staff? Deputy Secretary. Thank you. I will take the question about emergency situation of removal, and I will defer to the Deputy Director the question about the establishment. Now, after the amendment, FEHD staff will be able to handle short-front extension themselves. We have high concern for the safety of our staff in enforcing the law. That's why, as mentioned by the member, we have distributed 800 body-worn cameras to our staff. The results were good. In most cases, once the camera is switched on, the animosity would reduce. Now about carrying out operation, FEHD enjoys a very close relationship with other departments, including the police force. Assistance would be rendered very rapidly. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Now, the legislative amendment covers various scopes. For example, direct staff under the FEHD and the dedicated team for handling hawking issues. Now, the removal time has been reduced from 4 hours to not less than 30 minutes. It actually relieves our manpower situation because our colleagues don't have to stand on the street waiting for 4 hours. Now, when a notice is affixed to the obstructing item, we would simultaneously prepare for the removal process. In the past, we have to wait 4 hours. Now, with the change in the ordinance, it will smoothen the law enforcement process for our frontline staff. Together with the other enhancements to the punishment and so on, we do see significant improvement in the cityscape. So we don't expect additional burden to our frontline manpower situation after the amendments of the law. Next, Mr. Tong Li-Jie. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to follow up on the issue closest to our hearts, that is the effectiveness of law enforcement and also the prevalence of the cases. I've been handling water seepage complaints for many years. Now, the Joint Office for handling water seepage costs some $300 million each year. But we don't feel the improvement. The nuisance usually lasts very long. I think many members' ward offices have dealt with similar cases. It takes years to handle these complaints. So I hope the legislative amendments would be more powerful. A body-worn camera is besides the point. Now, the Joint Office comprises members from the Buildings Department and the and other departments. So I really want to see the system work. By simply extending the permissible hours of gaining entry, would that be very useful? You said you would enlist help from property management companies and the managers. That is great, but we have always had property management companies. If you're asking them to do more to help you, are you giving them more safeguards? For example, cleansing and scavenging operations. If owners litigate against loss of property, will you cover the loss suffered by the property management companies? If you want their help, you need to explain to them what the guidelines are. About the recovery cost or filing a claim. So when cost is incurred, you can recover the cost incurred from the OCs. Now, for uncleanliness in common parts, it may be restricted to a certain level in the building, so it is not fair to ask the entire building's residents to pay for it. Now, for fire services ordinance, if the obstructions to the fire escape is on a certain floor, the order would only target the residents on that floor. So we have to consider the fairness. You can't just ask all owners to take responsibility. Some owners are very public-minded. They would clean the common areas, even if this is not their premises.
解答下。
Three questions. Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions. First of all, let me just talk about the effectiveness question. On effectiveness, as mentioned just now, we are using a multi-pronged approach to speed up the handling of environmental hygiene problems. And it is indeed true. At present, we do not have specific figures and quantifiable data to show this. But on the other hand, if we look at the fixed penalty cases and the complaint cases, both have come down in terms of numbers. And for complaints, handling of cases, the time needed, the number of fixed penalties meted out, we will closely monitor these as indications of effectiveness. Second question concerning water seepage in buildings. The office responsible for water seepage, Mr. Tony Tse, has suggested that we work together with the management companies, and that is definitely a good way forward. For example, in buildings water seepage, we have a buildings management scheme concerning buildings water seepage, and there had been over 100 building estates participating in this, and there were 5,170 cases that were reported, and 3,800 cases had been mediated and resolved. So that is pretty good. And also for air conditioner dripping, there were 268 housing estates which had participated in this scheme, with 6,000 cases handled, and they have been satisfactorily resolved so that there need not be a legal or litigation process. So these have gone through the management companies, and the management companies have helped to smoothen out and resolve neighbor relationships. So we will continue to work with them, these management companies, and to handle such cases within the neighborhood. A third question concerning the public areas that are cleared. Let's say it is a public area around the stairs on the 17th floor of a residential building, and it is not the third floor, for example. Does it mean that the third floor owners will also have to be responsible for removal of articles or substances from the 17th floor? Now, if there is a problem with the 17th floor, we will issue the notice with the relevant parties, and the notification would only be issued to the persons related to the obstructions. It will not be involving unrelated persons or asking unrelated persons or owners to fork out the cost concerned for removal. Well, I'm very happy to hear the response and the confidence in the amendment of the ordinance, because in amending the ordinance, we wanted to have real effects. Chen Hoyan, thank you, Chair. Concerning the obstruction of public places and removal of garbage. Concerning this area, in the past, you had a time limit of 4 hours for removal of articles, and it's now reduced to 30 minutes. And also the fixed penalty had been increased. So giving you a very concrete example, in the Yao Chun Wang area and Tai Kok Tsui flyover area, the FVHD had helped in clearing the articles. Actually, the entire flyover underneath the flyover was filled with articles and substances placed there. That's in Sham Shui Po as well, and the pedestrians actually dare not cross or walk into that area. Now you're saying that there is an increase in the fixed penalty, but what if the situation is you have cleared let's say, the front of the flyover, but your officers are not there 24 hours, and what if after a day or maybe 2 days, the perpetrator comes back again? And I see that you have a daily penalty of $300, but I feel that that is limited in terms of deterrent effect, because the perpetrators, they move around from the head of the flyover to the end of the flyover, all around. So even with the passage of this ordinance, how much more manpower will you have to implement this? As my colleague, Mr. Chair, had mentioned, we are not here just to amend the ordinance for the sake of it. We want it to be effective, because sometimes it pertains to other departments as well. For example, the homeless. So the Deputy Secretary in our panel had also been answering this question, because it is cross-departmental, the work. And I see that you also have an issue, because this is not just about cleaning up the place. It also has other entailing questions and issues. For example, when you move the articles from an area, especially for perishables, you would provide a cost, an amount corresponding to the value of the perishable items. But on the other hand, you have already posted a bill, a notice. And if the person is liable under the law, then I also have a problem with you having to pay the value of the perishable item, because the person is in the wrong and you have posted a bill, a notice, and they do not comply, and after you remove the articles, you have to pay them back for the value of the perishables. That's not right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. For removing obstacles in cleaning the place, when we send out the notice, we actually demarcate a larger area so that the perpetrators cannot just move the articles or substances over a little bit and not comply. And secondly, on manpower, yes, we have to deploy our manpower wisely. And there are ways to reduce manpower requirement. For example, technology. The government had always had this as a main direction. It is also the expectation of society to use more technology. And in the black spots for health and hygiene, we have 460 such network cameras. And also for FEHD, they have some portable and handheld cameras cameras as well. All these are helpful. Cross-departmental cooperation is very important, as Ms. Chan had pointed out. Second part of the question concerning perishable items. If the person is found not guilty, would we have to, or guilty, would we have to compensate nevertheless? Because the person had already been meted out a penalty for the perpetration. So we will provide the compensation, because as it is a maximum penalty of fine at level 4 is $25,000 with 3 months imprisonment. So that is already the rightful penalty and punishment. The court had already decided on that, and the fixed penalty of $6,000 is not low in itself. So we believe that this compensation for perishables, because it is a private property, these perishable items, so under the effective claims mechanism, we can provide the claims amount minus the removal costs, because yes, any supplement? Yes, the Deputy Secretary had already made the response. Well, in our stipulation, 22, bracket 2A, we have already mentioned that within the time limit of the notice, the articles cannot provide another obstruction. So using the example of the flyover, it would not be where the articles will be moved from the front of the flyover to the, let's say, the end of the flyover. Our officers, our people would request that the articles be completely removed, and we will put a time limit to it. Within 14 days, the articles cannot be put within that general area to cause obstructions. So that would avoid the situation that you have mentioned, moving things around. Well, I do not agree totally to that. You mentioned just now that the removal of perishables, if you have already clearly posted a notification for removal, but there is no compliance, then it is already relinquishing the right. And also there is the person is found guilty, offending. It is an offense under the ordinance. And even so, you want to provide the value of the perishable items disposed to the claimant. I think this is not logical, because you have already posted the notice and there's no compliance, and you remove the articles concerned, and still there can be a claim for costs. That's not right. Right, we will go back and look at this again. Right. So, Mr. Leung, Dennis Leung next, first time speaking. Just now, Mr. Ho and Ms. Chan had spoken on this point, and that is, after you have posted a notification for removal of the articles, if these are indeed perishables or goods that are easily damaged, and if you have all the evidence and the legal basis for the removal, and it is a successful prosecution, then I would say that this is a correct enforcement of the law. It is successful prosecution. Then there should not be any chance for the perpetrator to make a claim for the amount corresponding to the value of the items disposed. Because if the person concerned sees the notice and complies, that is, removes the articles, because in enforcement there it can be unfair and unjust. But in this instance, the enforcement department is removing the items concerned. But after removing the items, if you provide an opening for the persons concerned to claim the amount, I think that is not right. So perhaps you can put in some more stipulations where there is a successful prosecution, then there cannot be any claims made. unless the prosecution is unfair and unjust, and under such a situation, we can understand that there can be claims. Now, if the government does not make an amendment in this regard, then at the later stage in the legislative process, I would raise this as an amendment. Well, the Deputy Secretary had already answered that question. Any supplement, please? Chair, I hear Mr. Leung. And the members' views, we have noted those as well. Concerning this particular view, we will be going back to our legal people to reconsider.
Next, Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to respond to a question raised by other members. I've questioned whether we should keep the owners from getting back the article or getting a compensation whether they are convicted or not. That is not right from the legal perspective. Second, about shopfront extension. I understand that under Cap 228, the maximum fine is level 4 and 3 months imprisonment. In the past, when you prosecute the case under Cap 228, were there instances where you ask for a sentence exceeding the $6,000 fixed penalty and invoke imprisonment? I'm not very comfortable in this. If the punishment is in exceedance of $6,000 and comes with a imprisonment term, then it would be very worrying for those small-scale operators. About removal of articles obstructing scavenging operation. In the past, the removal time was 4 hours. Now it is shortened to 30 minutes. Why is there such a drastic slash? Why not 1 hour? A year back, I helped some hawkers. Those hawkers might have left their stall unattended to find a toilet. Sometimes it is very difficult to find a toilet. When the trolley or when the stall is confiscated, they will have to apply to the court for getting back the stall. So can there be a longer removal time? About extending the permissible hours of entry from 7 to 7 to 7 to 10, will it incur any additional cost? 3 questions, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Doreen Kong. Under Cap 228, Summary Offences Ordinance, shopfront extensions have been dealt with. Now, in 2022, for FEHD's prosecution, there were 3,500, with 1,500 convictions. The highest penalty was $5,000 and $1,000 on average. For particularly serious cases, there were imprisonment terms or suspended sentence. So it has been very effective. Second question, Ms. Kong asked why we propose such a drastic reduction of removal time from 4 hours to 30 minutes. Actually, it's not less than 30 minutes. For special cases when a longer time period is warranted, we will exercise that discretion. We will issue guidelines to our frontline staff to take into consideration other factors in deciding the removal time. Concerning extending the permissible hours of entry from 7 to 7 to 7 to 10 at night, will that incur additional manpower? Now, given the changes in Hong Kong people's lifestyle, sometimes it is very difficult. Sometimes it is not common for us to be at home at 7 at night. So that's why we are changing the permissible hours. Now, Ms. Edward Leung, this is his first round. He will speak first. I would like to follow up on the garbage apartments issue mentioned by Mr. Chen Hock Fong. Very often, we rely on the cooperation of the occupiers to open the door, because the FEHD would be quite reluctant to apply for a court warrant. Even if they choose to do so, the time required is long. So on how many instances has the FEHD applied for a court order to gain entry into a garbage apartment? From the time of complaints to gaining entry to the premises, on average, how much time is needed? Will the amendment bill shorten the process? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Edward Leung. Now, by way of figures, for garbage apartments warranting immediate intervention, be it if the occupiers refuse to open the door for us to conduct a cleansing operation, we will issue a notice of intended entry and then a notice of intended entry. So in 2023, we have issued 11 such notices. So that is a way of telling the occupiers that we are going to apply for a court warrant. On knowing that, some occupiers or premises owners would change their mind and allow entry to us. Now, in 2022, there was one, and in 2023, 3 cases where we still have to apply for a court order. Now, for warrants issued by court and executed by us, there were 3 in 2023. For joint operation for cleansing garbage apartments, there were 5 such cases in 2023. So there is an established mechanism for dealing with serious cases to gain entry and clean the house. On average, there are 3 to 4 cases in a year. So how much time is needed to process each case? Thank you. That is hard to say. Mr. Chan mentioned about the case, or Ms. Rebecca Chan mentioned the case in Meifu Sanshun. So sometimes the situation varies. So we don't have the figures right now. However, normally speaking, we will adopt a pragmatic approach in dealing with garbage apartments. Will the amendment bill shorten the process? Some cases take years to handle, and the neighbors would suffer all the time. Thank you. The intent of the legislative amendment exercise is to shorten the process of handling public health nuisance. So there is a penalty for non-compliance of the notice of intended entry. So some reasonable owners would like to avoid criminality and allow us to enter their house. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung, this is also his first round. He will speak first. Thank you, Chairman. The amendment bill seeks to enhance the law enforcement's power under existing ordinances. Penalty levels are raised, so I get the intent behind the exercise. Still, this may impact the livelihood of people. So my questions are about notice of intended entry and public health nuisance notice or vermin notice, will the time given to the occupiers to abate the issues be shortened as well? Normally, how much time will the occupiers be given to abate the issues? Now, for vermin and rodent infestation, this is a troubling problem for many shop operators. Now, according to the paper, upon receipt of the notice by the owners or the occupiers or the persons in charge of the building, actions must be taken to abate the infestation. But there are two scenarios. One, they may put out a rodent's cage and make a show of taking action, but actually they are not. So how can you assure that they are actually taking real actions? The second scenario is the opposite. Several years ago, when the theater in North Point was demolished, that is, the State Theatre building, when it was demolished, the rodents fled to the nearby buildings. And the residents had no way to catch them all. So what if the rodent infestation is not the fault of the residents themselves? Another scenario, if a garbage apartment is identified, or if rodent infestation is caused by the faults of a certain shop operator, will you only punish the wrongdoer but not the owner's corporations? We agree that the owner's operations have to take care of their premises, but sometimes the rodents would wander around at night in the common parts of the building. So will the owner corporations be at fault for these situations? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Kwok, for your suggestions and comments. I will take the question about rodents infestation, and I will defer to the Deputy Director to elaborate on the operation of the notice of intended entry. Mr. Kwok asked whether some OCs would just pretend to be complying with the order. Now, we have a mechanism to prevent that. We have rodent detectors to keep tab of the situation. So we will only consider the notice is discharged when we are satisfied with the improvement. Now, whether we would punish those who are not the cause of the rodent issue, that is not the case. Before initiating prosecution, we will consider the reasonableness and whether the threshold or the bar is met. If the person is not the cause of the problem, our frontline staff will not prosecute them because it will fail meeting the prosecution bar. Now, for source of the problem, we will issue a notice requiring abatement of the situation. FEHD, Deputy Director. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Kwok's observations are correct. When we deal with water seepage, one of the challenges we face is gaining entry. During the investigation process, we need to gain entry to the premises upstairs and downstairs of the house. Now, we would collaborate with the owners. When there is the need, we will issue notice of intended entry to request access to the houses. At present, we don't have a rigid time period set for compliance of the notice of intended entry. Many a times, the owners would give us various excuses. For example, being outside of the city during the time or having a medical appointment. So we will require proof from the owners to verify their claims. Now we're going to make it an offense of unreasonable delay of compliance of the notice of intended entry. In terms of reasonableness, we will issue further guidelines to the frontline staff. Indeed, there may be genuine and totally legit reasons for not complying with the order, but we cannot allow the owners of the relevant premises to adopt a delay tactics. So like the Deputy Secretary said, in the future, non-compliance of the notice of intended entry will be an offense. So the court will be in a position to make a judgment if whether the reason is invalid or not justifiable. Now, concerning the time of compliance, we would like to share real scenarios and guidelines with our frontline staff, but we have to leave it to the hands of the frontline staff.
Chair, I understand the answer just now and the concrete examples, but on the other hand, if there is no time limit set, then it becomes rather nebulous. For some of the legislation, it would mention 14 days or a month where the objective will have to be reached and where there have to be special arrangements, circumstances, then the director will have to give a clear approval. Wouldn't that be the better or more effective way forward, please? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Kwok's suggestion can be a possible way forward. Yes, we will consider that as well. Third round of questioning. We have 4 members who have pushed the button and express a wish to ask questions. We will end this meeting at 12:45, and I don't think we will be exceeding that time. So we're extending the meeting for 15 minutes. So Stephen Ho first, and then Yang Wing Kit, Chen Hockfong, and Chen Hoyan. Well, actually, Chair, I was not very happy or satisfied with the question concerning the claiming for the value of the perishable items disposed. I think it is illogical. Now, just now, the Deputy Secretary had mentioned that this is private property, but on the other hand, if there is a successful prosecution, and after half an hour, there was no compliance despite the notice, the removal of the articles, and perhaps there would be a penalty and perhaps even imprisonment. But on the other hand, for the items that are disposed, if they have perished, then you are open the person to claim the values and costs concerned. If you say that it is a possibility for there to be a claim where it is reasonable, there can be the compensation, that's fine. But if you say across the board there is no question asked and the claimant will be getting the value of the perishable item disposed, that would not be right. So go home and think about that, please. And there are extreme cases where I see in fruit stores, for example, once they open, they put on, 4 pallets or cartons, and you post the notice. Yes, you have posted the notice, but on the other hand, those cartons are being cleared because the fruits are being sold. So there is movement. They are removing the items, the articles. Well, I have been in such areas. I have looked at the shops, and I see that the pallets are actually put onto the streets outside the shop front, and they have continued to put the pallets or the racks for the fruit outside of the shop front. But on the other hand, they are moving them in the sense that they from 4 levels of the racks going down to, let's say, 2 levels because fruit are being sold. Now, that's not satisfactory. That's not really moving the items. And also for loading and unloading of the goods for the shops, what would be a fair handling of such cases? To be fair to the citizens and the neighbors as well as the operators. So, and what about situations where the area is actually very wide? Can you actually think of, let's say, in loading and unloading situations, you can allow for certain space for loading and unloading to facilitate economic activities, and also our streets are very there are not many pedestrians. They are not busy at all, the streets nowadays. So perhaps can you even think about, without affecting the convenience of the pedestrians and without causing a nuisance in hygiene and safety, but on the other hand, we can make the streets more vibrant by allowing certain extensions. Well, and I also want to thank the relevant departments and also the FAHD in having done a lot of work in the past. Well, we thank Mr. Ho for his comments, and yes, there will have to be a balance between shopfront extensions, stamping out, and also the economic activities. This is for the good for the entire society of Hong Kong. In answer to the question asked just now concerning the claims mechanism, yes, we will be going back to consider that in answer to your question. And also another question about slowly moving the goods inside the shop as and claiming that to be loading and unloading, whereas in fact it is a shopfront extension and obstruction. Well, at present, we will request 30 minutes in clearing the obstruction, all of the instruction, unless it is clearly a case of unloading and loading of the goods into the shop. And if it is clearly not a loading and unloading situation, then within 30 minutes, the obstructions will have to be completely cleared from the public places or the streets. And what about, let's say festivals where there can be certain flexibility? Well, the FEHD actually, under certain circumstances at certain times, have certain flexibilities. So perhaps we can speak offline about this in private. Yes, next, Chan Hok-fong. Yes, I very much agree with Kwok Wai-keung in saying the time limit will have to be clearly specified. Otherwise, it can be a never-ending dragging on of, let's say, seepage cases, because you cannot gain access into the flat. Perhaps in the ordinance we can put in more details so that it will be clear for all. Let's say within 14 days, if I disallow, the flat owner disallows entry, then that would be contravening the law. Otherwise, you have to go to the court for warrants, and that would take time. Or would you want to amend the ordinance suitably here? Of course, there are specific and special situations which needs special handling. For example, the person has a night shift, the owner, and let's say, for instance, the person would not be at home at night, then perhaps the director will have to give a specific approval for a flexible arrangement. Now, for air conditioning dripping, it's usually at night. It occurs at night, but on the other hand, you have a because usually it is the summer nights and people switch on the air conditioner when they're sleeping. Of course, you do not want to cause a nuisance at night to the people, but on the other hand, if the streets are so dark and you cannot even see the dripping, even with with technology, how do you handle those issues then? Another question, 30 minutes within which the items will have to be cleared, but after you've turned your back, they move the items back out onto the streets again, after having removed it previously. So how do you do that? Do you give them another ticket? What do you do? First of all, on the operation of shopfront extension, the FEHD will answer that question. And as for the other question, Mr. Chan perhaps has suggested 14 days for being able to gain access into the premise. Otherwise, there will have to be satisfactory reasons given. We can go back and consider that. Now, for air conditioner dripping, well, definitely we do not want to cause a nuisance. We have set the time to 10 p.m. We do not want to go knock at the door at 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. But we have a 5G infrared camera which can take pictures and which can be provided as evidence. And also, for at 7 a.m. we can also go to the premise, even though the air conditioner is dripping overnight. At 7 a.m. we will still be able to be on site and get the evidence. As for this 30-minute limit, well, for obstruction of streets, we not only remove the items that are obstructing, but we can also mete out a fixed penalty of $6,000 plus. Now, apart from that, we are also requiring them to remove the articles within 30 minutes. So in the case mentioned just now, after the removal of the articles, after we turned our back, they move the articles back out again, then we can meet them out with another $6,000 fixed penalty. So I don't think the shops will be running that risk because they are liable to multiple prosecutions. Chen Haiyan, I think building seepage is a prevalent problem. And we have a lot of data. Let's say last year there were 40,000 complaints against seepage, and less than 30% of the cases were followed up. And there were some extreme cases where the situation had persisted for over 20 years without resolution. Now, I see that the FEHD is doing some work in this regard, but again, it is 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. where you gain access to the flat, and without reasonable excuse, for denying access into the flat, the penalty would be heftier. My question is, let's say the person says, I've been unwell, and it drags on for 3 months or 6 months, then the neighbor living downstairs would really suffer because that kind of water seepage would ruin furniture, etc. 1 day is too long already. So in such cases, what would constitute a reasonable excuse or reason, even though the person claims to be traveling abroad? The person can actually authorize a person or relative to open the door. So should we not set a reasonable time period? I mean, also the penalty had not been adjusted for 20 years. Now, with the adjustment this time, for the next round, let us not wait another 20 years. I mean, it was 1996, when the penalty was fixed. Can you have a regular review of these penalties so that we do not have to wait so long? Yes, in answer to Ms. Chan's question, it is true. Every year we receive 40,000 cases of complaints against seepage, and we have investigated over 16,000 cases in 2023, and identifying the source successfully was 6,000 cases. For the proposed amendment to the ordinance, as Ms. Chan had pointed out, for gaining access into the flat, we want to do that as soon as possible, and where we can identify the source of seepage and there is no compliance, we will be issuing a notice and an order, one from the FEHD, the order from the court for compliance, and there will be a daily penalty applicable as well. As for building seepage, through other means, we would want to speed up the handling of such cases. Just now it was mentioned that we work together with the management companies, and also we are trying out in the second phase and third phase of building seepage investigation to have certain mechanisms. In the first phase, for example, in the investigation, we ascertain that there is seepage, and the second phase is in the pipes, etc. We want to identify the work that can be done. In the third phase, there will be high-tech like infrared scanning, cameras, etc. And we want to be concurrent with these phases so we compress the time for handling.
Chairman, my question about the frequency is not answered. Yes, we will regularly conduct a review on the level of penalties. We will not wait another 20 years. So that's a pledge by the administration. It is my turn. I'm concerned about water dripping from air conditioners. Now, I know your cameras come with an infrared functions to detect the water dripping from air conditioners. Now, but the situation is especially thorny in my constituency, where there are lots of 3 new buildings with older owners' corporations. Now, besides issuance of the notice, the premises owner themselves have no way to abate the situation because there is no external drainage pipe on the building. Even if they want to abate the issue, there is simply no way to do that. So you need to assist them in rectifying the situation. Otherwise, no amount of notices issued would help. And also, for 3 new buildings, if you issue notice requiring ratification for obstructing articles or so on, like Mr. Song Li-jie said, should individual owner in 3 new buildings be held responsible for the compliance of the notice. Now, even if you have issued a notice, you can't gain entry into the premises. Now, like the FSD and other departments, there are support teams in NGOs to help these departments to gain entry and support the owners. Can the FEHD do the same? Besides punishments, I think you need to think about how to support the owners or occupiers. Thank you, Chairman, for your views. For all the buildings, there are some special measures for dealing with water dripping. For example, the Building Bright Operation 2.0, there are some subsidies to incentivize owners to complete statutory works and use the remaining sum of the subsidy to erect external drainage pipes for air conditioners. Now, as at the end of 2023, more than 70% of the participants in this scheme have indicated that they would install external drainage pipes. In terms of our support for 3-meal buildings, we do understand that it is very difficult for the residents to organize into an owners' corporation. That's why we work closely with the district officers to provide help. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung has also pressed the button. Thank you, Chairman. At the next meeting, can I ask further questions about policy issues? I will first ask whether other members would like to talk about the policy issues further. Now, I think other members would like to do so as well because we are already out of time. That's why they haven't pressed the button yet. If that is the case, I will allow questions on policy matters next time around. Thank you. So here's my view. The amendment bill looks simple, but there are all sorts of scenarios which can take place in public areas. So I would like to confirm with the administration what you will do in various scenarios. There is one case, one scenario, which I would like the FEHD to exercise discretion. There are a lot of caring activities for the community, especially handing out lunch boxes to elderly people. Now, in the past, we were saddened to see queues of elderly people waiting in the cold for a meal box. So in some districts, early in the morning, some elderly people would use chairs or a string to hold a position in the queue for them. Now, that may be a nuisance to the neighborhood, but I would like the FEHD to exercise discretion in handling these situations. I think the administration has heard your view. So as Mr. Kwok said, many members still have questions about the policy issues of the bill. So in the next meeting, we will continue with the line of questions about policy matters. So there's still some time left. I extended the meeting by 15 minutes. But since members have indicated your views, I will suspend the meeting here. Mr. Stephen Ho. Now, the administration said they would consider some legislative amendments, but I don't know whether they have sufficient time to answer our questions in the next meeting. So I don't know whether that will work. So let's call the next meeting first, and if necessary, we can have a third meeting. I will be flexible on this. Chairman, I have a suggestion. We will work it out with the Secretariat. Yes, please. If you have the answer, let's convene the second meeting together with the public submissions. Thank you. We will work it out with the Secretariat and the administration about the date and time of the next meeting. You will be informed in due course. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. No AOB. Thank you.